Welcome to another edition of the Plus One interview. And today, got an old friend. He's back. I think, Rob, this is the third time you've been back on?
I think 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Usually when you're ready for somebody to make a mess and,
Yeah.
shake things up, you kind of hit me up.
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's always great to have you on. There's so much happening with the documentaries. It's kind of a dead period. The NFL draft just passed. Just quickly before we get to the Last Dance with the Bulls, what did you think of the NFL draft, just how they did it, despite all the circumstances, and also was there any picks that really shocked you?
I would just say it was definitely different. The NFL just wanted to steamroll through, even though a lot of general managers didn't like it. And, when the commissioner has to threaten general managers with fines for saying that they'd rather wait, it just tells you something. I think people would still rather meet people in person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? To get a
Yeah.
feel for a guy. When you interview or hire somebody, you can do a virtual video kind of interview, but ultimately, before I say I want you, I want to meet you. I want to shake your hand. I want to see what kind of person you are. So I think general managers had a legit gripe.
Mm-hmm.
I think the NFL just wants to move forward. People are starving for some kind of sports. You know what I mean? So They don't care. They're just going to move forward. And it'll be interesting to see how the draft works out. And not really. Burrow should have been the first guy drafted. Tua's, coming off an injury and a number of injuries.
Yeah.
So people can sit around here and go, oh, I would have taken him. I just don't think so. If you're the Bengals, you can't get it wrong.
Yeah.
Burrow just had the greatest college football quarterback season in the history of college football.
Yeah.
And he's from Ohio. You pass on that guy and Tua winds up being hurt and Burrow winds up being a star, you'll never live it down. Even if Burrow doesn't work out, that's the right pick for a franchise like the Bengals.
Yeah, I think it worked out both for Tua and Joe Burrow, because he's going into a situation to Miami. They don't need to play him right away. They could still have him sit for as long as they can, have him rehab, because they still got Fitzpatrick. We all know Fitzpatrick, he is what he is, but right now
Pumpkin. He turns into a pumpkin after 3 or 4 good games.
Yeah, so they have him. They know what they're going to get for him, but they know at some point they'll put Tua in, but right now they don't have to throw him in right away in there. They could, the team doctors can have a look at him. He could rehab with the Dolphins. He could do more rehab with the Dolphins. They could have more hands-on with him, just so they could have him ready, so the pick could work out. I think it worked out for both teams. And also with the Packers going with the quarterback, that was the biggest shocker of the night, with the Packers going for a quarterback when Aaron Rodgers was asking for skilled players.
No, I get that, but they did the same thing when they drafted Aaron Rodgers when they had Brett Favre. Same exact thing. Brett Favre was 35 years old when they drafted Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's their organization. I'm with you. I mean, you were 13-3 last year in the NFC Championship game. You would think let's worry about to now, right? This season, the team was good. You have another shot to make another run, and maybe they feel like they can add some other players. They're doing stuff that they never did before in free agency. So maybe they feel like this was a guy who was there and they couldn't pass up on him, so they took him. But I would rather have seen them take some skill position players to try to help Aaron Rodgers. He could probably play for 4 or 5 years, have a chance to win a Super Bowl or 2. That's all he has to do. If he can win another one, definitely.
Yeah,
if he can win 2 in the next 5 or 7 years, the way guys are and shape that he's in, then you're golden. His career will be where it needs to be. He needs to have the second act, like Tom Brady had. Tom Brady won 3 early, went 10 years without winning, and then he won at the end. So you could have a second act.
And speaking of Brady, the biggest offseason move, isn't it strange that going into this season, the AFC East, every team has a quarterback set. They have their quarterback of the future, and New England's quarterback situation is very uncertain, because the 3 quarterbacks they have on the roster right now, they're just not the future. Jarrett Stidham, he's not the guy. We know what Brian Hoyer is, and Cody Kessler. We just know who some of these guys is, but it's just interesting to see how everything is playing out, how they're the team without a quarterback, and all the other three teams have their young quarterbacks of the future.
Well, they had their quarterback. He's in San Francisco. He went to the Super Bowl last year. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And it was hard to want to get rid of Brady after they had won that last Super Bowl. So that had they not won, then it probably would have worked out. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy G would be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just think after 20 years, and I think Brady, I think he's washed. I think everybody's ready to put Tampa Bay in the playoffs and the Super Bowl and all that. I just don't see it. I see the players they have. It's like an old-timers day. Let's bring back Gronk. And whenever you have to beg somebody to come back to play, it just, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's not the kind of game, football, that you should have to be convinced into playing. It's something that you should want to play. And Gronk, to me, gave up his competitive card when he started doing the wrestling. Once you start doing scripted, you're not a competitor anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. I still think that division is tougher than people want to believe it. I know they want to just hand it over to Brady, but I'm not buying it. Even last year when the Patriots were 8-0, I called them the worst 8-0 team in NFL history because they hadn't beaten anybody. If you go look at the games that they, it was embarrassing for the other team. But they struggled against good teams, and you saw what happened in the playoffs. So I think Brady's better days are behind him. He's going to be 43 this year. And, Tampa Bay hasn't made the playoffs in 12 years. It'll be a baker's dozen after this year with Brady.
They got a lot of hype going in. At least they're selling tickets right now because they have.
You remember the Browns? You remember the hype last year? When the Browns went from 1 million to 1 to 14 to 1 to win the Super Bowl after they made the trade for OBJ.
I understood that. Yeah.
Remember that? Oh, look at the offense. Oh, you won't be able to stop them. Oh, Baker Mayfield. Oh my God! Remember the year he had last year when they won 7 games? Now look, they got Kareem Hunt coming back. They got this, they got that. What happened? They didn't make the playoffs. It ain't as easy, and games on one on paper. So I'm not buying it. I'm just not. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, with the Bucks, for me, what I'll say with the Bucks is they were kind of hampered by their quarterback play last year. You can't have a guy throw. How many turnovers he had? Like close to 40 turnovers.
Well, he had 30 interceptions, but he had 30 touchdowns. He threw for 5,000 yards. I mean, there were pluses, and I get it. 30 interceptions is terrible. It's as bad as it gets. But I still like the Saints better. I think the Falcons bounce back. So I could see them being third in the division. And I know they added an extra wild card team, but the NFC is stacked. I'm not convinced that Tampa Bay is going to be the team that picks it.
Yeah, I'm ready to see how this goes. With all the quarterbacks, I know they always have one. When they get to 40, there's always that one good year they have before it falls down. Because we saw with Brett Favre, he had that one moment with the Vikings, and then at the end he just threw interceptions, and then he came back the next year when he should have never came back, and we saw how that.
It was
ended.
bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So I want to see how this act will go, but yeah, it's going down from here because it's just not physically it's just not possible for him to keep going, especially when these players are getting more athletic, they're more faster.
And people they live in the past. They're still living. Tom Brady's not 35, really. And I think people look at that and they look what they did last year, and they've had an advantage for a long time. When you play in the AFC least and you got 6 wins, 5 or 6 wins automatically from the division. You know what I mean? And then all you got to do is win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl. That's the formula that the Patriots have had for a long time. We'll see now with Tom Brady how that works out.
What would you call it? What would you call it a success if they make a wild card, if they make the playoffs with that?
If they make the playoffs is a success because I don't have them making the playoffs.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. And now we're going to talk about this Last Dance documentary. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You covered those championships? Those Bulls championships?
I covered the NBA on a daily basis from 1987, my first year, through 2000 through 91. Mm-hmm. And then I covered them as a columnist. But I'm just saying as a beat writer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I did see Michael Jordan. I was in Cleveland when Michael Jordan made that famous shot over Craig Elo. I was sitting courtside at the half court mark. I had great seats. I remember it vividly. I also was there for the Scottie Pippen migraine game. I was there. They also referenced where Jordan missed a free throw.
Yeah.
Against the I covered that game. I covered that series. So I was around Jordan a lot during that time when he was trying to get there. And the thing that I think people don't understand is he wasn't anointed anything early on, no matter how great he was in the numbers. People used to rip on Michael Jordan. Oh, he's just a dunker, just a scorer. He doesn't make anybody better. He'll never win. All that stuff was written and said back then. And after 7 years in Chicago, and you got to remember, the Bulls were an awful franchise when he got there. They had never won. And he didn't bail after 7 years. He didn't try to join some other team or try to get other stars to come to Chicago to play with him. He worked it out. Well, I mean, he worked it out with what he had. And people could talk about, Scottie Pippen didn't come from some big school. I get it. He was a 5th pick overall. But he wasn't, tapped as some 50 greatest player of all time at that time. So, and then the other pieces parts. He didn't have a lot of great players, but he was able to put it together. I've been enjoying it. I just like all of the footage. You know what I mean? The footage. That's what's new to me. I was covering the NBA, so a lot of those stories I know, but the footage is interesting to watch.
Yeah, and with the first episode, with episode 3 with Dennis Rodman, and then Dennis Rodman, he gets to Detroit. He's shy. He's kind of starstruck or just doesn't realize everything that the benefits of being an NBA player. And it was like those guys, Lambeer, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars. They kind of took him in and they kind of nurtured him, and they just kind of kept him away from all the distractions when he was with Detroit, and it turned out to be a great thing for him. He was a great piece for that team. And then as he went off to that, they said he was sleeping in the car with a gun in the passenger side, and then
they thought he was going to commit suicide that night. There was a lot of turmoil going on in Detroit that wasn't addressed in there, and that pushed him to the brink. And he was saved, I guess, because he fell asleep or whatever and didn't go through with it. But he was at a bad point, and then he just turned into wedding dresses and makeup, all the other stuff. He just went off the deep end. Even if you see the interview with Barbara Walters in that, where he dressed up and she's asking him a question and he's fluttering his eyes. I mean, I looked at that and was like, wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Social media was around for Rodman. It would every day would be a headline.
He got killed because it was just strange. But everybody, like Dennis, was a different person, but he could play. And ultimately, this is what I talk about all the time. You don't have to be on board with everybody and what they're doing and their lifestyle and what they're into or whatever. But when you're asking people, can they participate and put in and contribute to what it is you're working, right?
Yeah.
That's all that matters. The bottom line is to get somebody to work. And Michael Jordan, those guys, go, oh, Michael, they wouldn't want that guy. He's a freak show. He can rebound. He can play defense.
And the way he explained rebounding too, there was a point in the documentary where he was explaining rebounding and positioning and how certain players shoot. When they shoot, how the ball comes off. That's great attention to detail. And every team needs role guys like that because Rodman, he never wanted to do more than he could. He just knew, I'm a defender and I'm a rebounder, and this is what I'm going to do.
Right. No, he did, and he locked into it, and it worked out. And that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, for his rebounding, you could imagine, a guy with, minimal offensive skills in the NBA, yet he was able. I mean, he was around to win 5 championships. He won a team, and he was a part of it. He went on the back of the wagon, just along for the ride. He was a part. He was up front driving.
Yeah. Now, you were in Detroit for so long. There's still this
22 years.
It's 22 years. Now there's still this animosity between Bulls and Pistons. And when I go on Twitter, I see native Detroit folks. They just have this disdain for the Bulls, and then the Michael Jordan, Isaiah Thomas issue. What did you make of the game when the Bulls swept the Pistons and them not shaking hands? Because it goes back to
I don't
the
think
'87.
Yeah, I don't think everybody. I think Joe Dumars and some other player stood around to shake hands. It wasn't, and all the other ones walked off. And I thought it was classless. I just, and no matter what, like when the Pistons beat their butt, Michael Jordan and them stuck around and shook their hands. I think that's just sportsmanship. You might not like the team, and there is a rift. Detroit is the only place Michael Jordan got no love. I mean, I remember covering stuff. Even in New York, people in New York would love to see Michael score 50 against the Knicks, but they wanted the Knicks to win the game. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was the love loss. They didn't want Michael to win. They wanted their Knicks to win, but they wanted to see him put a show on. In Detroit, nobody wanted to see Michael Jordan do anything. It wasn't like that. They weren't starstruck. They had their team that represented their city, and it was all about the Pistons and their guys, and they wanted no part of Michael. That's the only town I would say. And, the rift between Isaiah, and you heard it last night where Jordan was very candid about his take and really didn't want to hear what Isaiah had to say. So this goes way back. I still believe it. I know they won't cover it, and I know people try to poo-poo it. But there's a rift there that also comes from when Jordan was snubbed in the All-Star game.
Oh, okay.
And supposedly Isaiah and Larry Bird, but Isaiah came up with the idea of not passing. This is when the league was trying to push Michael, and he was his rookie year.
Yeah.
And I think he had 8 points in that All-Star game, or 8 shots or whatever it was. He wasn't able to beat Michael Jordan in that All-Star game. And I think that that's part of it is rooted there.
Is there a more great player that's more disliked than Isaiah Thomas and anybody from those bad boys Pistons? Because it seemed like there's a real dislike for Isaiah Thomas.
Isaiah, he was a hell of a – the one thing about Isaiah, you could say, maybe people didn't like him and thought he was sneaky or whatever that people thought. But I'll tell you, he was a hell of a basketball player. He beat Jordan, Bird, and Magic all in their primes. And you could say whatever you want. Nobody else did that. And when you look on that team, there was no other 50 greatest player on that team. Joe Dumars was a great player. They had a number of great players, but not on the level that other guys had. And for him to be able to do that, he was a hell of a player. So, and the whole idea or notion that, that Michael didn't have anything with Isaiah not being on the dream team. I mean, you just heard Michael. Here we are, 30 years later. You heard the disdain in his voice, right? Last night. Okay, so that's years later. So you could imagine during that time, how in the world could Isaiah not be on? I just told you, he beat Magic, Michael, and Bird in their prime. How wasn't he on the dream team? And here's the other part. At the time, Magic was his best friend. Chuck Daly was his coach, who was the Olympic coach. And Jack McCloskey was the GM of the Olympic team. He had 3 big people in his corner. How did he not make the team? There's only one person who could have upset those 3 guys. Do you know what I mean? And make it happen. How else? Magic, the coach, Chuck Daly, and Jack McCloskey, who was the Pistons GM. How?
There's everybody knows he should have been on that team over John Stockton, and then he let John Stockton know when the next time they met.
Because gave it to him.
And one thing I want to get into with those bad boy Pistons, besides them being robbed of going 3 in a row, because I believe they should have won it in 88. Was it 88? I believe they should have won it with that phantom foul call. But in every sports league, there's always that one team that messes up the natural order of things. I mean, you could say it was the Pistons in NBA. In football, you could say it was the Oakland Raiders. I know that in baseball you could tell me of a team. But in every league, in every sport, it seems like there's a team that just messes up the natural order. And it seemed like the Pistons, they were messing up the natural order of things.
No doubt. There is always a team like that, and the Pistons were that team. But, I was covering the NBA. I loved it. I was there when they beat Portland in the NBA Finals. I covered that. I was still working in New York at the time. And then, but the Pistons were something. I can still remember when they lost to Bird and them, and Isaiah threw the ball, and Bird stole the ball and passed to Dennis Johnson for a layup for the Pistons to lose a huge game in Boston. And I'll never forget it. But they're a special brand. They're loved by the city, represents the city. And the Bad Boy Pistons weren't pretty, weren't there for the NBA. They're playing for themselves in their city. They were not what the NBA wanted, but they had to take them. And there's no way you could tell the NBA's history and story without the Pistons.
Yeah. Now, when Jordan finally got over the hump, then when he wins his first one, you saw the sense of accomplishment with him hugging the trophy and just having an emotional moment with the trophy. Now, we know he was still great, but people were still wondering. But when he did that, it felt like, okay, the league is his now.
No, I agree, because you know what? This is the one argument that I think when I talk about LeBron minions is that they discount or poo-poo winning. Sports has a short menu, wins and losses. Nothing else really matters. It ain't about getting to the finals and getting swept and go, well, at least they made it to the final. That's really not what – it's about winning. It really is. And so – once Michael, everybody knew he was a great player, but he still had to win. The reason that they don't talk about, nobody talks about Jim Kelly with the Buffalo Bills, right? Jim Kelly was a great quarterback. They won. They went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. He didn't win. Dan Marino, go look at his numbers and what he was doing way before throwing the football was a big thing. He was an unbelievable. Did he ever win? Didn't win. It's about winning. Marv Levy took the Buffalo Bills as coach to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. Nobody ever mentions him as one of the greatest football coaches ever. Why? Because he didn't win. So you got to get your ticket punched. And that's what happened with Jordan when he finally broke through. People could look at all the other stuff and go, damn, he can play defense, he can dunk, he can shoot, he can do everything. And he can win. And that's what it comes down to.
What was also interesting about last night was Phil Jackson's story. I mean, it seems like Phil Jackson's been a great coach wherever he was. Puerto Rico. Then it was like
CBA. They won a championship.
CBA. He won a championship.
I don't disagree with that he had won prior, but he got help a lot. I mean, and I'm not. He still was a coach because I've seen great teams not win with great players. I mean, the Atlanta Braves had 3 Hall of Fame pitchers on one staff for over a decade, and they went to the playoffs like every year for 15 or 16 years, and they won 1 World Series. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I've seen where you had talent and didn't win too, and you got to look at the coach or the manager and figure it out. But arguably, he's had look at the 2 squads he had. If like when you have Michael and Scotty and Shaq and Kobe, I mean, come on, I'm just. It's hard for me to look at you and go, oh, yeah, it's all about you when you have 4 of the greatest 10 players who ever played. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that does help. Doesn't mean that you can't mess it up, but you got to look at – it's still about players. And so I give Phil his respect because he won 2 championships as a player, and he won in the CBA and all the championships. He's been around a lot of championships. But had he taken over the Knicks as coach rather than – GM and turned him into a winner, and then I would say he's the ultimate and the greatest coach I ever saw. But I just can't say that. I still would pick Larry Brown over Phil Jackson. Yeah, as the greatest basketball coach I've ever seen.
Well, Phil Jackson does well. He just knows how not to mess things up. He just knows.
Right.
He knows how to get.
And he knows how to deal with people, and that's a big part. You saw the part about Rodman. And what he was able when they let him take 48 hours off, and Mike had to go to Vegas to go get him. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Like not too many coaches would be game for that, but he's off center, the Zen master, and all the other stuff that he's into, the hippie. So when you add all that up, he probably in a different way was a Rodman. Do you know what I mean? In his day, so he could understand what Rodman was going through.
Yeah, I mean, especially when they talk about him doing acid and thinking he's a
Exactly.
lion.
Just think about that. Like, it was a different world, but wow.
Yeah. What were some of your other takeaways from last night's 2 episodes?
Just really more about the Phil stuff was good. It was, more in depth, and the Rodman thing. I think they could have gone a little bit more in depth into his time in Detroit and what went wrong and what soured. I really got the Jordan dislike for the Pistons, and also I think if millennials and Generation Z or whatever they are, the younger people, saw the style of play that Michael Jordan had to endure. You saw it every time he went to the hole, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this was none of those were flagrants. I mean, if you touch somebody now, it's a flagrant. I mean, he didn't get any special treatment. The NBA didn't do that during that time. And weren't you surprised?
Yeah, because there was oftentimes, if you look, a lot of the photos, if you looked at it, anytime he went to the hole or he went up in the air, there was 3 Pistons surrounding him every single time.
And touched him.
Yeah. And it was just like up onto the next play, because usually now we have stop play, go look at the instant replay and a whole bunch of stuff.
Throw somebody out the game, you know what I mean, and all that. It just was a different league. I love that league, and I was glad that I was able to cover it during that time and be sitting. I sat courtside back then. The reporter sat right courtside, and I saw a lot of that stuff up close and personal, man. It was awesome.
And then, and lastly, before we get you out of here, what did you make of the migraine game? Because
I covered that game, and that was, let me tell you, I didn't think Scotty would ever live that down. Game 7 on the road, and you got an ice pack on your head, and you're sitting there, and your team gets demolished. You know what I mean? Because you can't go out there and play. And I can remember writing a story and covering that and being like, Scotty, how's he going to live this down? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. You're hurt or whatever, but people, no one feels the pain of your migraine. No one's in your head. So they just look at you and go, how could you not play a game 7? I don't care if I had a headache. And most people who don't have migraines have no idea. When a guy says you can't see, it's hard to be out on a basketball court if you can't see.
Yeah.
But it was definitely one of those NBA moments that, again, I witnessed in person.
Yeah, because Michael Jordan, when they asked him about it, he gave the politically correct answer, but you could tell that he was probably in the back of his mind, he's like, I don't care about a migraine. If you're on the court, you're on the court.
Right. But I mean, that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
If he didn't play at all, then he would have been worse. You know what I mean? Like, if he wouldn't even try, they were like, come on, can you try? You know what I mean? Like, everybody would have said, can you just go out there and try? Because the game 7 and you're missing your number 1 dog, you know, your number 2 dog to Michael. It was tough.
Yeah, and then later on down, I mean, a couple years later, Scotty had that moment. He wanted to come off the bench because the play wasn't ran for him.
Right, It was ran for Tony Kukoc.
Yeah,
and he didn't. And he said he was pissed. He didn't want to come off the bench. And of course, Kukoc made that shot. It was, I think, a 3 against the Knicks, and it hurt the Knicks. That was that turning point in that series. But one of the turning points. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, but I mean, this has been great so far. The first 4 episodes, it's been some good insight on everything. I mean, especially with all the behind the scenes footage, just getting a closer look at.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's priceless. Seriously, like just to see Michael with his hair down, relaxed. You know what I mean? Just being himself, not being afraid to talk in front of the camera. That's really the hard thing, to get somebody knowing that you're being recorded and not guarding your words, or not, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, even when he's playing around with one of the players and he's saying, man, I don't want this on. My mom and dad are going to see this or whatever. And he said, hey, your son's an alcoholic or whatever. You know what I mean? He was kidding around, but I'm just saying, just knowing the camera's on and still just go through it then.
Yeah, that was great. All right, Rob, thank you once again. Just tell them if they want to follow you, if they want information, the Odd Couple, and all that.
Yes.
Just give them all the information.
Odd Couple, of course, Fox Sports Radio, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Me and Chris Broussard. Back at it tonight. Of course, Undisputed and The Herd. I haven't been on because of the pandemic. But obviously, those guys are still kicking it right now and doing it. So those are things, FS1. And also, I have a new book out called If I'm Writing, I'm Ripping. You can get that at Amazon.com. Some really good columns. There's a couple Tom Brady and LeBron James columns in there.
I have it. I have the book.
Am I right? Got some good columns.
A lot of funny stories in there.
No doubt. So if you can pick it up, Amazon.com, I appreciate it.
All right. That's Rob Parker, FS1. Thanks, Rob. Once again, appreciate this.
Man, always anything for you.
All right. Everybody, been watching that +1. Have a great day.